Have you ever looked around and wondered why some people seem to glide through life while others stumble over the smallest stone? The difference isn't that they were born with more answers or a bigger library of facts. I've seen men with shelves of books collapse under pressure, and I've seen quiet souls with little education remain unshaken while others lose themselves in chaos. The secret is never just what they know, it's how they choose to see, how they choose to think when the storm comes. Most of us are taught to collect knowledge like trophies, but no one teaches us the art of thinking with clarity. That's why one small setback feels like the end of the road. One careless word lingers in the mind like poison. One closed door feels like the collapse of everything. Yet there are those who look at the same storm and find patterns instead of panic, lessons instead of wounds. What makes them different? What do they practice that most of us overlook? Stay with me and let's walk into these truths together, slowly, carefully, one insight at a time. As we step into the first chapter, picture this: two voices colliding in the air like swords clashing. One person pushes to prove their point, the other raises their tone. A battle forms, not of reason, but of ego. And in that battle, no one wins. Only pride walks away, scarred. This is how most of us live. We mistake being right for being wise. We confuse the roar of argument with the quiet strength of clarity. But those who rise above, the ones who seem untouchable, see a different path. They know that the sharpest blade is not the tongue that cuts, but the mind that inquires. Now imagine a moment of disagreement. A friend, a colleague, maybe even a stranger throws words like stones. Your first instinct is to hurl them back, to defend, to prove. But what if you didn't? What if instead of firing arrows, you opened a door? Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "If someone is mistaken, teach them kindly and show them the truth. Don't rage against them." The Stoics understood that when you fight for victory, you lose sight of wisdom. The true strength lies in curiosity, in asking the questions most people are too proud to ask. Consider a scene: two people debating in a crowded cafe. One red-faced, veins in his neck, straining. The other calm, steady, sipping tea before gently asking, "Help me understand why you see it that way." The entire room shifts. The angry man begins to soften, his certainty wavering under the weight of being truly heard. The audience, silent, senses the power not in the loud one, but in the quiet one. That is the moment when intelligence reveals itself, not as dominance, but as presence. Epictetus taught, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This is not just advice for politeness, it is strategy for living. The Stoic doesn't waste life trying to convert every opponent. He listens, asks, and lets the truth emerge of its own accord. And here is the paradox. When you stop forcing, people stop resisting. They let down their armor, they walk into clarity on their own. What was once a battlefield becomes a bridge. I've seen this play out in the workplace. A heated meeting, voices rising, egos bruised. One leader sits still, breathing through the noise. When the storm dies down, he leans forward and says, "What do you need me to understand about this?" The room exhales. Suddenly, the arguments collapse and dialogue begins. No one remembers who shouted the loudest. They remember the one who created space for truth. That is what earns respect. That is what outsmarts the crowd. This is not weakness. This is control. Anyone can shout. Few can hold silence long enough for wisdom to surface. To ask instead of accuse requires discipline. And yet, in that humility is the fiercest power. Because the one who listens shapes the conversation more than the one who speaks without pause. So let me leave you with this. Battles of ego are smoke. They choke, they blind, they leave you coughing, but questions, real questions, are firelight. They illuminate, they warm, they change the room. Step into that light. The next time you feel the pull to prove yourself, resist it. Ask instead. You may find that you win not by defeating someone, but by helping them see. And in that moment, you will already be walking toward the next lesson, where the vision grows even larger. Moving into the second chapter, picture a man staring so closely at a single crack in the wall that he forgets he lives in a house built on stone. That is how most of us face our troubles. We fail a test and decide we are failures. We get turned away once and believe we are worthless. One rough day and suddenly our entire life feels broken. The mind zooms in too far, clinging to a single frame, and forgets the wider story. This is where strength dissolves, not because the world has crushed us, but because our vision has shrunk to the size of a wound. But what happens when you step back? What changes when you treat life like a painting and not a single brushstroke? Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He was not dismissing pain. He was reminding us that when we take one stumble as the whole road, we create suffering that was never there. The wise zoom out. They see not a failed exam, but a pattern, sleep lost, methods weak, perhaps help needed. They see not rejection as a verdict, but as information, a clue in a larger puzzle. Let me give you a picture. A young woman applies for a position she dreamed of. She is denied. In her narrow lens, it feels like the world has closed its door forever. But then she breathes, widens her gaze, and sees that her skills lacked polish. Her network was small, her approach unrefined. She studies differently, connects deliberately, applies again later. What once felt like the end becomes a step. She was not destroyed, she was redirected. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." To zoom out is exactly that, reclaiming the mind from panic. Life's troubles are not boulders meant to crush you. They are puzzles laid at your feet, and puzzles invite thought, not despair. Each wrong answer is not proof of stupidity. It is proof that the answer exists, waiting to be found. Think about the soldier in battle. If he stares only at the dust before his boots, he sees chaos. But if he climbs the hill, the field opens. The patterns of movement reveal themselves. Decisions become clearer. What looked like a trap was simply terrain. What looked like doom was simply fog. The same is true in the battles of ordinary life. Zoom out and you gain the high ground. So ask yourself in moments of collapse, what is really happening here? What is the larger frame? What can I still control? What small step today shifts the pattern tomorrow? These are the questions of the steady mind. They are not born of denial. They are born of courage. Here's the truth. Panic is blindness, but perspective is sight. When you step back, problems stop being verdicts and start becoming riddles, and riddles can be solved. Hold to that thought, because from here, the path leads to an even deeper freedom, learning where to place your energy and what burdens were never yours to carry. Advancing to the third chapter, imagine carrying a sack filled not with stones, but with worries you can never set down. Every opinion someone has of you, every shift in the weather, every mood your boss brings into the office, every possible failure waiting for you next week. The sack gets heavier, though nothing inside it can ever be used. and still we drag it day after day. No wonder our shoulders ache. No wonder our spirit bends low. We are exhausted not because life is impossible, but because we choose to carry what was never ours to carry. Now imagine dropping that sack. The relief, the sudden lightness, the freedom to move without chains. This is what the wise understand. They ask one question again and again. Is this within my power? If the answer is no, they release it. Epictetus said, "Some things are in our control and others not." Simple words, but sharp as steel. Most people nod, then keep worrying. The Stoic lives by it. The rule is clean. If I cannot command it, I will not let it command me. Think of the rain. You cannot stop the clouds. You cannot speak the sky into sun, but you can carry an umbrella. You can decide not to curse the storm, but to walk through it prepared. That is control. The rest is noise. Or consider the judgment of others. You cannot climb into their heads and bend their thoughts, but you can live with honesty. You can act with integrity so that even if whispers rise, your conscience is clear. The noise cannot touch you if your inner ground is firm. I once watched a man fail an interview. He left the building pale, muttering about unfair questions, about the panel's mood, about fate itself. His energy went into curses, not growth. Another man left the same room, also rejected, but he asked, "Where can I improve? Was my preparation weak? Did I present poorly?" He sharpened himself, returned, and won the role months later. One wasted strength on what he could never control. The other invested in what he could. The difference was not chance, it was clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Emperor of Rome faced storms greater than any of us will ever know, yet he understood the same truth. We rule little outside us, but within us we are sovereign. To remember this is to save energy, and energy saved is energy for life. So let this be clear: worry drains, focus builds. When you stop scattering yourself into every shadow, you begin to shape what matters. And when you do that, the sack is gone. You walk straighter, you breathe easier, you act with precision instead of panic. The world remains turbulent, but you are no longer tossed by every wave. The man who masters this truth is already wealthier than kings, because he spends no coin on what does not belong to him. Hold this thought, for from here another tool awaits, one quieter, subtler, but no less powerful. Here's where the fourth chapter unfolds. Imagine a room where voices overlap, words collide, and everyone scrambles to be heard. Then, in the middle of the storm, someone remains quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they know the value of silence. Suddenly, the noise bends toward them. People turn, waiting, sensing that when this person finally speaks, it will matter. Quiet does not weaken presence, it sharpens it. Silence, in the hands of the wise, is not emptiness. It is a blade. Most fear silence. A pause in a conversation feels like a crack in the wall, and they rush to plaster it with words. They speak not from thought, but from panic. But the one who can breathe in that stillness gains an edge. Seneca once wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." To pause is to learn. To hold silence is to see what others reveal when you are not filling the space. When you stop rushing to respond, you notice details, the hesitation in their tone, the weight behind their words. What others miss, you catch. I remember sitting in a negotiation. The other side threw terms across the table, rapid, forceful, expecting me to scramble. Instead, I said nothing. I let the words settle. The silence stretched, their confidence cracked. They filled the gap with concessions they hadn't planned to give. Silence did the work no argument could. The Stoics knew this truth. Stillness unsettles the restless. The one who listens controls the rhythm. The one who waits decides the timing of the strike. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. In silence, you estimate more clearly. You stop reacting to noise and start observing reality. This is not passivity, it is strategy. To think before you speak is to master yourself. To listen before you answer is to command respect without demanding it. Words that rise from stillness carry weight. Words that pour from haste scatter like dust. Try this simple act. The next time someone asks you a question, count to 3 before answering. Watch how the moment changes. The pause gives you clarity. It gives your words gravity. It tells the other person you are not tossing pebbles, you are placing stones, and stones build walls that last. Even more, silence makes people feel heard. When you resist the urge to interrupt, you give them space to unfold. And in that space, trust grows. Quiet people often seem wiser than those who shout. Not because they possess more facts, but because they choose their words with care. Restraint is not emptiness, it is power held in reserve. The world expects noise. Defy it. Use silence as your ally. So remember this. In a world that trembles with chatter, the calm voice becomes thunder. The next time the room grows restless, let your quiet shape the air. From here, we move to the final weapon of the wise, the pause that protects you from the storm inside. At this stage, picture a flame touched by wind. Some sparks leap, uncontrolled, burning everything in reach. Others glow steady, refusing to be carried away. That is the difference between reacting and pausing. Most people ignite at the slightest gust. A car cuts in front of them. They explode. A careless insult lands. They lash back. A plan breaks down. They collapse. The world pulls a string, and they dance. But those who pause claim something far greater, the right to choose their response. Now, imagine yourself at the edge of anger. Someone's words sting. Your chest tightens, fists clench, the urge to strike back surges. This is the moment where lives are shaped. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That truth lives here. The pause is not weakness, it is sovereignty. To breathe before answering is to break the chain that binds you to another's chaos. You ask, is this worth my peace? What serves me more, vengeance or clarity? Already you have stepped higher. I once watched 2 men confronted in the same way. Both were insulted in public. The first shot back, words sharp as knives, leaving the room tense and hostile. He walked away, looking powerful, but feeling hollow. The second man, older, calmer, simply looked at the offender, breathed, and said nothing. His silence landed heavier than any insult could. The crowd respected him more than the man who fought. Power was not in the volume of his words, it was in the depth of his stillness. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Pausing is that realization in practice. When you pause, you step out of the fire and into command. You see not just the surface of the insult, but the suffering behind it. Maybe the rude man is burdened. Maybe the driver is desperate. Maybe the storm belongs to them, not to you. To pause is to separate your soul from their storm. Think of it as the warrior's discipline. The blade that is drawn too quickly cuts recklessly. The blade unsheathed with patience finds its mark with precision. In life, your pause is that blade. It turns accidents into lessons and insults into air. The one who thinks while others react is the one the world follows, because he alone stands unshaken when tempers flare. So remember this: calm in the heat of chaos is not surrender. It is power at its purest. Practice the pause. Test it in traffic, in arguments, in moments of frustration. Watch how your choices sharpen. Watch how people begin to trust your steadiness. Because sometimes a single breath is enough to outsmart the storm. Yet this is only the surface. Once these practices take root, they begin to reshape everything: your influence, your vision, even the way freedom feels inside you. Wisdom, when lived, ripples outward, and that is where our path leads next. Not to repeat the steps already taken, but to see how they transform the ground we walk on. Here's where the path deepens. You've seen how asking instead of arguing disarms conflict, but there is another layer to it. Influence does not come from crushing another's voice. It comes from guiding thought, quietly, until the other person begins to see through their own fog. That is a power far greater than victory in an argument. It is the ability to shape the ground beneath the discussion without ever raising your voice. Now imagine two people locked in debate. One shouts, his face red, his hands cutting the air, as if the louder he speaks, the truer his words become. The other leans forward, calm, curious, and says, "What do you mean by that?" The room tilts toward the second man, not because he has proven himself superior, but because he has made the first man think. That moment of reflection is influence. Seneca once wrote, "To be conquered by reason is the noblest of all conquests." When you stop fighting, you invite reason into the room. I once watched a leader handle a situation that could have exploded. A team member accused him of making a poor decision in front of everyone. Most would have defended themselves on the spot, eager to restore pride. He did not. He paused, looked at the critic and asked, "Help me see what you would have done differently." The tone changed instantly. What began as attack turned into dialogue. Others leaned in, not to watch a fight, but to witness understanding. That leader did not lose ground. He gained it. The Stoics knew that mastery of self is mastery of others. Epictetus reminded his students that no man controls another's opinion, but he can awaken thought. When you ask questions with sincerity, you create space. Into that space, truth has a chance to enter. And when truth enters, resistance fades. It is not submission, it is recognition. That is how minds shift, not through force, but through light. Think about the river carving stone. It does not shout. It does not rage. It simply flows, steady and patient, until even the hardest surface bends. Influence works the same way. The more you resist the urge to dominate, the stronger your presence becomes. People will seek you out, not because you proved them wrong, but because they felt safe to discover the right answer themselves. This is not weakness. This is the essence of strength. To control the pace of the exchange without ever lifting your voice. To shape the conversation not by force, but by patience. To know that the question is sharper than the accusation. The wise do not waste their energy on battles that end in bitterness. They invest it in openings that lead to growth. So remember this: You cannot force another to agree with you, but you can create conditions where their own reason leads them closer to your truth. That is the quiet art of influence. And from here, we step into another realm, where vision expands beyond the moment, and the small storms no longer consume the whole horizon. Moving into the next chapter, think of a man standing in a valley staring only at the stones around his feet. Every rock feels like an obstacle, every shadow like a threat. He bends under the weight of what is small because he cannot see what is large. Most of us live like this, trapped in the frame of a single moment, unable to step back. But wisdom begins when you climb the hill and look down. The same valley that felt like a prison now looks like a path. The stones no longer block you. They guide you. Here's where the Stoics invite us to lift our eyes. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You always have the option of having no opinion. Things themselves have no power to shape us." What did he mean? He meant that the single failure, the single rejection, the single day of darkness does not define the whole. It is a fragment, not the picture. To see only the fragment is to suffer twice, once from the event and again from our blindness. To see the pattern is to discover meaning. I recall a young man who lost his job. For weeks he told himself he was finished, worthless, cast aside. Each morning he stared at the dismissal letter as if it were a death sentence. But then something shifted. He began to see it not as the end, but as information. His skills had gaps. His habits were weak. He needed growth, not pity. Within a year, he had built something far stronger than the role he lost. The dismissal became the spark. From despair came direction. Life often whispers through failure. A test that humbles you may be teaching better discipline. A rejection may be pointing you toward a door you would never have knocked on otherwise. When you zoom out, problems stop screaming and start instructing. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Every cut of difficulty is part of the shaping, but you only see it when you refuse to collapse into the moment. Ask yourself in the storm, is this the whole story or only a page? What does this piece belong to? What lesson hides behind the sting? When you frame life this way, setbacks become puzzles, and puzzles can be solved. Even more, puzzles sharpen the mind. You stop saying "why me" and begin saying "what now?" That change in perspective is the birthplace of strength. The truth is simple but hard. The narrow view suffocates, the wide view liberates. To live only in the small frame is to drown in drops of water. To rise and see the sea is to remember that no wave lasts forever. The wise do not panic at one crash against the shore. They see the tide, they see the rhythm, they see beyond. Carry this vision with you, because from here, another lesson waits. The freedom that comes when you stop scattering your strength on what was never in your hands to control. Advancing to the third chapter, picture a man trying to dam the ocean with his bare hands. Each wave he fights leaves him weaker, yet the tide does not change. That is what life becomes when you waste your strength on things that lie outside your reach. Most people do this without pause. They gnaw at opinions they cannot alter, dread storms they cannot stop, and collapse under burdens that were never theirs to carry. The body tires, the spirit bends, and still the tide rolls on. Now imagine setting your hands down, stepping back, and noticing what you can touch. The small stones on the shore you can move, the vessel you can repair, the sail you can lift. Suddenly, your effort matters. Epictetus taught, "Some things are up to us, and some are not." To forget this is misery. To remember it is freedom. The wise refuse to scatter themselves into every shadow. They cut away what lies beyond their command, and they pour their fire only where it can burn. I once met a man who worried endlessly about his reputation. Every whisper, every glance, every rumor ate him alive. He tried to bend the minds of others, to force respect through endless explanations, and yet the more he fought, the more brittle he became. Another man I knew lived differently. He said little, worked steadily, and anchored himself in honesty. He did not control what people thought. He controlled what he did. In time, the very people who doubted him began to lean on his steadiness. Influence came not through grasping, but through self-command. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each dawn, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That line is more than comfort. It is a discipline. When rain falls, the wise carry an umbrella instead of cursing the sky. When denied an opportunity, they refine their skill instead of drowning in bitterness. When others choose malice, they keep to their integrity, knowing that another's vice is not their burden. This clarity saves energy, and energy saved is life itself. Think of a craftsman at his bench. He cannot control the price of wood in the market, but he can control the steadiness of his hand. He cannot control who praises his work, but he can control the care he pours into it. And in that care, mastery grows. The noise outside fades, and the work becomes its own reward. This is the secret of those who endure. They spend no coin on what they cannot buy. So here is the truth. The mind that chases every cloud will never see the sky. But the one who chooses wisely where to place his strength becomes unshakable. When you stop feeding the fire of what lies beyond you, you kindle the fire within. And from this inner blaze rises the calm authority to face storms without trembling. Carry this, for ahead lies another weapon just as subtle, the quiet that speaks louder than noise. From here the path turns quieter. Picture a crowded hall where voices clash and words pile upon one another, each person desperate to be noticed. Then someone chooses silence. They lean back, breathe, and wait. The noise continues, but something shifts. People begin to glance towards the one who has said nothing. The quiet figure suddenly holds the weight of the room. This is how silence becomes more powerful than sound. Now imagine a conversation at your own table. Friends argue, each interrupting the other, rushing to speak before they are even heard. In the middle of it, one person listens, not with indifference, but with full attention. When they finally speak, the room falls still. Their words carry gravity because they rose out of patience. Seneca wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings." The Stoics knew that restraint is not emptiness, it is discipline. To wait before speaking is to let wisdom settle. I remember a teacher who had this gift. He rarely raised his voice. In class, when someone offered a foolish comment, he would simply pause, let the silence linger, and then ask a single question. That question cut deeper than any lecture could. The pause made his words unforgettable. His authority did not come from volume, it came from presence. This is where quiet becomes a tool. It commands attention without force. It unsettles those who expect argument. It comforts those who need to be heard. The one who can hold silence is not defenseless. He is untouchable, because silence disarms. When you don't rush to fill the space, you leave others alone with their own thoughts. And sometimes that is the sharpest response of all. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If someone is mistaken, instruct them kindly. If you cannot, bear with them. Notice the wisdom in that order. Speak only if words will heal. Otherwise, let your silence stand as your answer. In a world addicted to noise, silence becomes rare. And what is rare becomes precious. Think of silence as the pause before the strike of a bell. The stillness makes the sound more profound. So too with your words. If every sentence spills out without measure, they lose their edge. But if you choose carefully, cutting away the unnecessary, what remains will echo long after you leave. That is why the quiet man often appears the wisest, not because he knows more, but because he refuses to waste what he knows. Remember this: noise is cheap, silence costly. Wield it and you influence without shouting, command without demanding. Carry this truth with you, because ahead lies another discipline, one that turns the simple pause into mastery over the storms within. At this stage, picture a battlefield where chaos roars, arrows fly, men charge, and most are swept away by panic. In the middle stands one figure who does not rush. He pauses, he breathes, he sees what others cannot, the hidden path, the weak flank, the trap disguised as victory. That pause is not weakness, it is command. Now imagine your own life under fire. Someone insults you and every instinct screams to snap back. A driver cuts you off and your pulse surges. A door closes and despair whispers, "Give up." Most people surrender in those moments. They react, and in reacting they are ruled. Epictetus warned, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." The pause severs that leash. It keeps you free. I once saw a man tested this way. In a meeting, he was accused unjustly, the words sharp and public. Everyone expected him to explode. Instead, he leaned back, let silence fill the air, and asked, "Is this really the issue, or is there something deeper we need to address?" The room shifted. The accuser faltered. The heat cooled. By pausing, he gained what force would have lost. Marcus Aurelius used to ask, "Does this deserve my soul?" The pause gives you time to ask the same question. Often the answer is no. Not worth rage, not worth despair, not worth losing yourself. That breath creates distance between the blow and the response, and in that distance lies your strength. Think of a blacksmith. Strike too soon and the iron bends. Wait for the right heat, and one blow shapes it true. Life is the same. This is not passivity, it is precision. The one who can wait a heartbeat before speaking, before acting, is always stronger than the one who lunges first. The pause does not dull action, it sharpens it. It turns impulse into choice, chaos into clarity. So remember this: the pause is your hidden weapon. It shields you from becoming a puppet of circumstance and makes every response your own. Practice it in small things, and when the storm rises, you will stand untouched. For the one who holds the pause already holds the power. Here's the truth. You don't need to be the loudest voice or the smartest person in the room. Real strength is in thinking differently. Ask instead of arguing. Step back and see patterns where others see panic. Focus only on what you can shape and release what you cannot. Embrace quiet and pause before you act. Start with just one of these habits this week. Subscribe if you're ready to grow, and in the comments write, "Stay calm." Remember, greatness is built choice by choice. Keep walking forward, and I'll meet you in the next lesson.